See that sign? No shirt, no shoes, no dice.
Right.
You remember the mall, the van, the pizza delivery in the middle of class. But Fast Times at Ridgemont High wasn't just another teen comedy. It was a powder keg wrapped in a popcorn box. Beneath the laughs was a film that dared to be honest. One scene was so raw it nearly got the movie banned. Another stirred protests outside theaters across the country. These are 15 weird and wild truths about Fast Times. And wait until the end, because the bonus fact, it reveals the one thing the director never wanted the world to take away from this film. Number 1. Before it was a film, Fast Times at Ridgemont High was a risky social experiment. In 1979, journalist Cameron Crowe, then just 22 years old, walked into a San Diego high school and enrolled as a student. The principal knew. No one else did. Crowe spent a full year blending in, observing, writing everything down. He wasn't looking for stereotypes. He was looking for truth. What teens talked about when teachers weren't listening. What they feared. How they loved. How they hurt. And what happened when no one thought the adults were watching. The result was a nonfiction book called Fast Times at Ridgemont High, a raw, uncomfortable, hilarious portrait of youth that barely got published. It raised eyebrows. It broke rules. And Universal Pictures bought the rights before the ink was even dry. But here's the part they don't tell you. The studio loved the idea of a teen movie, but they didn't want Crowe's realism. They wanted laughs, soft edges, high school fantasy. Instead, they got Spicoli, abortion, shame, and a version of adolescence that felt too real for the execs watching it back. Crowe didn't just write the film, he lived it first. And by the time the cameras rolled, the script wasn't just fiction, it was a diary with a pulse. Number 2. Before Fast Times became a cult classic, Universal Pictures wanted nothing to do with it. Studio executives were terrified of its honesty. They saw the abortion subplot, the casual drug use, the awkward first times, and they panicked. This wasn't Grease or American Graffiti. This was messy, human, and, to them, unmarketable. In early test screenings, some audience members walked out during Jennifer Jason Leigh's scenes, uncomfortable with how raw and vulnerable they were. Behind closed doors, executives debated cutting entire plot lines, and some even argued that the film should skip a theatrical release entirely and go straight to cable. But Amy Heckerling, a first-time female director with everything to prove, refused to back down. So did Cameron Crowe. Together, they fought to keep the story whole, to protect the parts the studio thought were too real. They didn't want another teen fantasy. They wanted a mirror. And that mirror nearly got smashed before anyone could see what it reflected. Number 3. In 1981, a young Nicolas Cage, still going by his birth name Nicolas Coppola, was desperate to break into acting. Fast Times was already casting a wave of unknowns, and Cage saw an opportunity. But there was a problem. He was only 17, legally too young to be cast in one of the film's featured roles unless the studio agreed to emancipation and tight work restrictions. So he did what many hungry actors do. He lied. Cage claimed he was 18. He auditioned with confidence, hoping his famous last name and fast-talking style would seal the deal. But casting directors caught on. His paperwork didn't line up, and instead of landing a breakout part, he was pushed to the background, a silent fry cook in the burger joint, barely seen. Still, he showed up every day, watching, learning, and absorbing the energy of the cast around him. Years later, Cage would credit his Fast Times experience as the moment he understood just how far you could go to become a character. Number 4. Some actors read the lines, others become them. Sean Penn wasn't just playing Jeff Spicoli, the stoner surfer with a one-track mind. He was living him. From day one, Penn refused to break character. He demanded to be called Spicoli by the cast, the crew, and even the director. He signed hotel receipts with the name. He showed up to scenes already speaking in slow, spaced-out surfer slang, even when the cameras weren't rolling. It wasn't a joke. It was a method. The performance was so convincing that some crew members forgot what Penn's real voice sounded like. Forrest Whitaker later said that during production, he assumed Penn actually was like that in real life. And here's the twist. Spicoli wasn't in the original script nearly as much, but Penn's dedication, improvisation, and unpredictable energy gave the character new life. The studio saw the footage and immediately pushed Spicoli into more scenes. He was only supposed to be comic relief. Instead, he became the soul of the movie.
My brother's gonna kill us! He's gonna kill us!
Relax. All right? I can fix it.
Number 5. Forrest Whitaker was a quiet, serious actor in his early 20s when he landed the role of Charles Jefferson, the soft-spoken football player who turns into a wrecking ball when his prized car gets trashed. At first, Whitaker thought the character was exaggerated, a comedy stereotype of the angry black athlete. He felt uncomfortable. He questioned whether it was the right fit. But that changed when Cameron Crowe pulled him aside. Crowe explained that Jefferson was based on a real student Crowe had met while undercover at high school. The kid was a gentle giant who only lost his temper when pushed too far. It wasn't a caricature. It was someone Crowe respected. Whitaker listened, then leaned in. He gave the character stillness, weight, and purpose, a performance that could have been played for laughs, but instead became one of the film's most grounded roles. Sometimes, even in a comedy, the quietest characters leave the loudest echoes. Number 6. It's one of the most paused scenes in VHS history. But in 1982, the now famous pool fantasy almost didn't make it past the studio gates. Executives were nervous. The film was already pushing boundaries: sex, abortion, drugs, casual profanity. Then came the moment where Phoebe Cates emerges from the water in slow motion, red bikini, music blaring, all in Judge Reinhold's imagination. Universal execs panicked. They worried the scene was too much, even for an R rating. Some felt it sexualized high school too directly. Others feared it would overshadow the rest of the movie. Amy Heckerling, the director, pushed back hard. She argued that the scene wasn't about objectifying women. It was about the male fantasy gone wrong. It ends awkwardly, embarrassingly, painfully real. Eventually, they relented. The scene stayed. And pop culture was never the same again.
Hi, Brad. You know how cute I always thought you were.
Number 7. Jennifer Jason Leigh's performance in Fast Times was fearless, honest, vulnerable. But what most viewers don't know is that her very first day on set was the film's most emotionally raw scene, the awkward first-time encounter in the dugout. She was only 20, the crew was mostly older, and the scene required her to strip, emote, and deliver lines that exposed every ounce of her character's insecurity. Leigh later admitted it left her shaken, not because of the nudity, but because of how emotionally exposed she felt. There was no easing in, no soft opening, just one of the most uncomfortable moments of teenage life, captured on film before she even had time to breathe. And she nailed it. Her performance became the beating heart of the movie. Not glamorous, not exaggerated, but devastatingly real. Because adolescence isn't all parties and spicolis. Sometimes it's heartbreak in an empty stadium. Hey, if this story's already surprising you, just wait. It only gets more intense from here. If you're enjoying the video so far, feel free to like and subscribe, because the next few facts, they nearly got the film pulled from theaters altogether. Number 8. Today, Fast Times is remembered for its jokes, its slang, its stoner brilliance. But quietly, one of its most important scenes almost never made it to the screen. When Jennifer Jason Leigh's character has an abortion, there's no melodrama, no after-school special, no punishment, just a young woman making a difficult choice and moving forward. It was one of the first times in a mainstream American movie that teen abortion was shown without judgment. No crying in the rain, no moral lecture, just a quiet, realistic moment. But that honesty didn't sit well with studio executives. They wanted the scene cut, arguing it was too heavy and would alienate audiences. They begged, they pressured. But Amy Heckerling and Cameron Crowe refused. They held their ground, knowing the scene wasn't about politics. It was about truth, and because they did, Fast Times earned a place not just in teen movie history, but in cinematic history.
Stacy, he's not a guy. He's a little prick.
Number 9. There's a moment in Fast Times when Jefferson's younger brother and his friend crash his beloved car, and then try to blame it on rival students. The smashed windshield, the crushed hood, the chaos. What you're seeing, that's real destruction. The car was wrecked on set, and the scene was filmed with minimal stunt coordination. In fact, according to some crew members, there was almost no protection around the shooting area. One wrong move, one missed timing, and the crash could have gone very wrong. But what makes the scene memorable isn't just the crash, it's the way Forrest Whitaker plays the aftermath. Silent, deadly, no yelling, no tears. Because when everything you care about is broken, sometimes silence says it all. Number 10. Amy Heckerling was new to Hollywood, young, female, and constantly second-guessed by studio execs who didn't trust her instincts, so she made one of the boldest decisions a director can make. She started filming without telling the actors, to capture real reactions, moments when teens stumble over words, drift off mid-sentence, or change expression in ways a script could never plan, Heckerling would quietly roll the camera, let the scene play, and catch the raw edges the actors didn't even know they were giving. Sometimes the cast thought they were rehearsing, when really that was the take. It gave the film a unique rhythm, awkward silences, spontaneous laughs. It felt lived in, not staged. And it's why Fast Times still feels so painfully perfectly human. Number 11. When Fast Times at Ridgemont High finally hit theaters in 1982, the backlash came fast and loud. A nationwide parent advocacy group launched a campaign against the film, accusing it of glorifying teenage sex, abortion, and drug use. They didn't just write editorials or send angry letters. They organized protests outside theaters, demanding the film be pulled from circulation. Some theaters caved. Screenings were canceled. Local officials in conservative towns pressured cinemas to reconsider their bookings. At one point, Universal seriously considered pulling the film from select markets altogether. But Amy Heckerling and Cameron Crowe didn't flinch. They knew the truth they were telling wouldn't be easy to watch. But that was the point. Because when you tell a story honestly, someone will always try to shut you up. Fast Times didn't just survive the protest, it outlived them. Number 12. Most of Fast Times takes place inside a mall, the epicenter of teen culture in the early 1980s. But that wasn't just a clever backdrop. It was a real place. The Sherman Oaks Galleria in Los Angeles wasn't just a filming location. It was one of the most iconic malls in America at the time. Kids didn't just go there to shop, they went to be seen, to flirt, to eat pretzels, and watch each other grow up in real time. Heckerling chose it on purpose. She wanted that real energy, with real teens wandering the food court during takes, and the authenticity shows. Today, the Galleria still stands, remodeled, modernized, but still echoing with the ghosts of Spicoli, Brad, Linda, and Stacy. It's not just a setting, it's a time capsule. Number 13. Amy Heckerling was the first woman to direct a major teen film for a major studio. But behind the scenes, she wasn't treated like a trailblazer. She was treated like a risk. From day one, studio executives questioned nearly every decision she made. They pushed to remove scenes. They told her to lighten the tone. They warned her to make it more fun and less sad. And most of all, they wanted the film to be a teen sex comedy, not a coming-of-age drama. Heckerling pushed back. She insisted on keeping the abortion subplot. She fought for Jennifer Jason Leigh's quiet breakdowns. She refused to turn Spicoli into a cartoon. Even the music was a battle. She wanted the Go-Go's. They wanted Eagles ballads. The Compromise? A soundtrack with both, which ended up becoming a cult hit of its own. In the end, Heckerling won more battles than she lost, but she paid for it in stress, isolation, and pressure few male directors ever faced. She wasn't just making a movie. She was fighting to tell the truth and keep her voice intact.
What are you people? On dope?
Wait a minute, there's no birthday party for you here.
Number 14. When Fast Times at Ridgemont High was first submitted to the Motion Picture Association of America, the response was almost instant and nearly fatal. They wanted to give it an X rating, not because it was pornographic, but because it was too honest, too raw, too willing to show teenagers having sex, buying beer, smoking pot, getting abortions, and not being punished for it. This wasn't the kind of youth story Hollywood was used to telling. It didn't wrap things up in neat moral lessons. It didn't glorify rebellion, but it didn't condemn it either. The studio panicked. They begged the filmmakers to make cuts. Cameron Crowe and Amy Heckerling agreed to a few trims, but refused to remove the heart of the film. In the end, the MPAA relented. The movie was released with an R, but that early threat of censorship is what gives Fast Times its edge. It didn't flirt with honesty. It stared it in the face and didn't blink. Number 15. In America, Fast Times pushed boundaries, but in parts of the world, it crossed the line entirely. After its release, the film was either banned outright or heavily censored in Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, and several conservative parts of Europe. The reasons varied: teen sex, the abortion scene, drug use. But the message was clear. This movie was too much. One reviewer called it a moral threat to modern youth. Another said it glorified sexual confusion. Religious groups picketed theaters. School boards issued warnings. But with every ban, the movie's reputation grew. People who weren't allowed to see it wanted to see it even more. And as history shows, nothing gives a teen movie more power than being told it's dangerous.
Didn't anybody fucking knock anymore?
Bonus fact: after Fast Times hit theaters, the studios took the wrong lesson. They saw Spicoli, Phoebe Cates, the awkward hookups, the drugs and laughs, and they rushed to recreate the formula, giving rise to a wave of 1980s teen sex comedies like Porky's, Revenge of the Nerds, Bachelor Party, and more. But Amy Heckerling was devastated. She never intended Fast Times to be a comedy at all. To her, it was a drama, a human story, a mirror of how teens actually lived when the adults weren't looking. In interviews years later, she said, "They made it about the wrong things. They laughed at the heartbreak." And that's what makes Fast Times different. It had laughs, but it wasn't laughing at anyone. It was listening. Fast Times at Ridgemont High may have started as a book scribbled down by a 22-year-old in a notebook, but it ended up shaping an entire generation's idea of what growing up really looked like. It showed us the mistakes, the silence, the moments no one ever talks about, and it did it without flinching. If this gave you a new perspective on a film you thought you knew, we'd love to have you stick around. Feel free to like the video, and if there's a moment from Fast Times that stayed with you, or a fact we missed, drop it in the comments. Thanks for watching, and in the words of Jeff Spicoli himself,
All I need are some tasty waves, a cool buzz, and I'm fine.